This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Newbrunner. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Rescuers raced against time to search for the missing, a day after a powerful earthquake shook southern Japan, killing at least 13 people. South Korea's financial leaders convene an emergency meeting to discuss market turmoil that has wiped out billions of dollars of value after a two-day tech-led plunge in the stock market. Beijing accusing Washington of suppressing Chinese firms after the US banned the import of foreign-made humanoid robots and power inverters. China reportedly in touch with Yemen's Houthi rebels to allow its tankers a safe passage through the Red Sea. Also tonight, China's biotech ambitions under scrutiny after a 6-year-old child reportedly died from experimental gene editing treatment. A leading Chinese scientist has been placed under investigation.
This is Yeoncheon, the northernmost county in Gyeonggi province, sitting right on the border with North Korea. It's one of the most heavily restricted places in the country, with much of its land under military control.
And that was CNA's senior correspondent Lee Mong-suk taking us to the rural county that's larger than Seoul, where promises of a basic income is transforming daily lives. First, the chief executive of Japanese firm Aeon has apologized and vowed a comprehensive inspection after one of its malls collapsed in the wake of yesterday's 7.1 magnitude earthquake. The tremor was the highest level on the Japanese seismic intensity scale. The epicenter located near Kumamoto Prefecture. At least 13 people are dead, many others still unaccounted for. Nearly 37,000 homes remain without power as the entire country continues to swelter under a heat wave. More than 9,000 people are seeking shelter in evacuation centers. Some communication services in the area have been disrupted. Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi says authorities are working at full capacity on disaster and relief efforts.
Rescuers continue a frantic race against time to search for survivors more than a day after a 7.1 magnitude earthquake shook southern Japan. One of the key sites, a shopping mall outside Kashima and Kumamoto Prefecture, that was torn apart by an apparent explosion soon after the quake struck. Rescuers are combing through the debris after the second floor collapsed. An investigation is underway into the cause of the blast. Mall operator Aeon says its staff evacuated more than 200 shoppers and workers right after the initial quake. Scores of injuries reported in other affected areas, with hospitals treating wounds ranging from burns to fractures. The quake left a trail of destruction, causing sections of a stone wall around the historic Kumamoto castle to crumble into the moat, and a bridge to partially buckle and fall into the Kumagawa River. The government is prioritizing saving lives, deploying thousands of personnel for disaster relief operations. Aircraft have been dispatched to help assess damage and deliver aid. The epicenter was about 20 kilometers south of Kumamoto City. That's central Kyushu's largest city with a population of around 700,000 people. Police said they received more than 380 emergency calls, including reports of collapsed buildings and people seeking rescue. The initial quake was followed by more than 100 aftershocks.
Staying on our top story, let's go to CNA's senior correspondent, Mitch Ishida, joining us live from Tokyo. Mitch, what do rescue and relief efforts look like? What do they focus on when damage is as extensive as this?
Well, rescue and relief is ongoing at Aeon Mall, Kumamoto. As you've heard, Aeon held a news conference and said there were 3,000 shoppers on Tuesday, more than the average weekday due to summer holidays. And there were 2,700 workers. And 30 minutes after the strong tremor, shoppers were evacuated. Then 50 minutes after, an explosion took place. Now, President of AEON, Mr. Akio Yoshida, said 3 were still missing. In all, he confirmed 3 died, 1 was under cardiac arrest, and 4 injured. And he said all of them were workers at AEON Mall. Now, at Nippon Paper Industries, rescue and relief also continue, according to Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara. Local media say 7 were rescued, and among them 5 died and 2 sustained injuries. And there are 4 others trapped inside whose conditions are unknown. Then there are reports from residents that there are people inside collapsed homes. So there could yet be many more requiring assistance. Now, Ms. Takaichi said at the top of an emergency disaster response headquarters meeting this afternoon, rescue workers have been increased with 4,600 members of the self-defense force, 2,000 police, 1,210 firefighters on the ground. She said so far, 450 evacuation shelters have been set up. Food, water, carbon box beds, commonly used in the past couple of years as disasters, supplies, have been prepared. And Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi said 300 air conditioners were transported by the self-defense force and backup power are being pushed out.
Probably very hard to pinpoint at this point, but what is the immediate and greatest impact of the quake that you're seeing today?
Well, Takaichi government has not actually given a big picture of the damage yet. But we do know Kumamoto is an industrial area with semiconductor factories. I was actually there last November, and in the area, there's Taiwan's TSMC operating its factory, with the second one under construction. Tokyo Electron is another major semiconductor company. Also, there's Mitsubishi Electric, Sony, and Honda makes its motorcycles. Bridgestone makes its tires. And they're all reported of suspending operation. In Honda's case, its sprinkler turned on and flooding parts of the factory. Outside Kumamoto and nearby prefectures, Daihatsu suspended its factories. Toyota Motor did too. But so far, no damage has been reported. But for how long operations are suspended, it's not clear due to aftershocks. The government has been calling for residents to be on the alert for another possibly big one until next week. Now, there are also disruption to public transportation. JR said in a news conference, local train lines will remain suspended. Railway tracks have been damaged and electric poles leaning towards the tracks. And Kyushu bullet train has been partially resumed, and Japan Airlines has decided to schedule flights between Fukuoka and Kagoshima. Utilities may take long to restore. Power outage is reported in 84,000 homes.
All right, thank you so much for those updates. CNA senior correspondent Michishita reporting to us from Tokyo. China firmly opposing a U.S. ban on foreign-made humanoid robots, accusing Washington of using the move to suppress Chinese firms. The U.S. FCC says the measures are aimed at safeguarding national security, while a White House task force found that foreign-built robots could pose a cybersecurity risk to critical American infrastructure. Now, China's foreign ministry dismissing that claim and accusing Washington of ulterior motives.
中方一贯坚决反对美方泛化国家安全概念，打压中国企业。保护主义提升不了美国的竞争力，只会损害美国企业和消费者的利益。中方将继续采取必要措施，坚定维护中国企业的正当合法权益。
Let's unpack a little more. Crystal Chia joins us live from Shanghai. Crystal, first of all, what's the significance of the U.S. ban on the humanoid robots?
Yeah, so let's first talk about the ban. The ban is essentially targeted at robots with 2 legs or 4 legs, so meant to mimic humans or animals. And the reason for the ban is this fear that these robots would be able to steal important information, extract data, and then send them to Beijing. Now, this is important to China because China is a world leader in this sector. Earlier this month, I was at the WAIC conference in Shanghai. It is an AI conference, and I saw a variety of robots doing different things. They were folding clothes, they were making Chinese tea. I was buying a drink from them at the convenience store, and they were getting me my items from the pharmacy. Now, at this point, those robots that I saw, those in the market right now, they are still moving in slow motion, but it's really a matter of time before they catch up. So it is perhaps no wonder that they are increasingly attracting buyers overseas. Exports of these AI-powered bionic robots have passed 10,000 units for the first half of this year, reaching 90 countries. And among these exporters that may be affected by this ban, analysts say that Unitree, the company behind the dancing robots that we are familiar with, they would be most impacted because they hold about a fifth of global market share.
Unbelievable. Now, these humanoid robots, just, I imagine, one friction point of he said, she said between US-China relations when it comes to the race for technology. What else, though, do we really need to be looking out for here?
Now, President Trump has said that he will talk with President Xi when they meet in September, their next face-to-face meeting. They will talk about AI. China has responded saying that they stand ready to work with the US on AI. Now, this push to engage China comes amidst what we are seeing, especially in recent months, this increasingly powerful AI capability by China. We remember Moonshot's Kimi K3. That was a large language model startup that rattled markets, especially as financial investors started to question about whether America's lead in the AI race is safe. And now this week, there was another tech in the spotlight. DUV models. Now, DUV machines, excuse me. So these are chip-making tools, and this tech is currently being dominated by Dutch supplier ASML. But we are reading media reports citing anonymous sources that a little-known state-backed company called Aishengna, they have started production of these tools. Now, the technology is still being tested here, but if successful, it would represent a big win for Beijing's drive for self-sufficiency. Now, as this race intensifies, several tech leaders have started to address this rivalry. Meta Platforms' Mark Zuckerberg said that banning Chinese AI would not be an effective solution, and that he urged U.S. companies to look at their own bottlenecks to see how to better compete with China. And over here, the founder of Zhipu AI, that's one of our top large language model startups, the founder has released an internal memo last month saying that he believes frontier AI should stay open, it should remain broadly accessible to all, and that it should not be only controlled by a select few. Jill?
All right, thank you for the heads up and that context. Crystal Chia in Shanghai. Still to come in East Asia tonight, questions swirling over whether the hundreds of billions being spent on AI can deliver the promised returns. We'll look at what's fueling the sector's swings between fear and frenzy next. Welcome back, everyone. We've got your business news with Roland Lim. Roland, if I was to say that a company delivered record earnings but still didn't impress investors. You wouldn't believe it. But when that company is SK Hynix, it's a different story.
Yes, it is, because the market had actually priced in near perfect execution for SK Hynix's results. Investors disappointed there'll be delays in shipments of its most advanced products. Now, that letdown dragged SK Hynix shares almost 10% into the red. The plunge also weighed on South Korea's main stock index, the Kospi, sinking 6%. It now lost some 16% in the past 2 days alone. The country's top financial authorities are holding an emergency meeting to discuss the market turmoil affecting what was once a blazing AI rally. SK Hynix reported bumper quarterly results, but they fell short of the lofty investor expectations. Quarterly revenues rose 257% from a year earlier to a record $53 billion. Now, net adjusted income, that rose more than 1,000% to $63 billion. However, revenue fell short of industry estimates. SK Hynix said delays in shipments of some advanced products limited price gains in its mainstay DRAM chips. The company said it is seeking more long-term supply agreements to better manage chip price volatility amid concerns that spending on AI infrastructure could eventually cool. SK Hynix said it has concluded talks on about 10 such deals and is continuing discussions with other major industry players. The chipmaker also said it plans to raise capital spending to $27.6 billion this year, reflecting confidence in its future demand. Despite the earnings miss from one of the biggest winners in the AI trade, Ritesh Ganeriwal from SAFE explains why he still believes the industry's long-term growth remains intact.
I think the enablers have still a huge demand for them to meet. And it just shows up because you see the 557% year-on-year growth on the earnings from SK Hynix. It did underperform from earnings expectation standpoint. But that's probably also why what you're seeing is more of a valuation reset of sorts, because these companies have rallied quite ahead of the earnings expectations. And when the earnings do not hold up to the bar that has been set, then obviously you will see some of that correction. And this is also showing up in kind of like a momentum break of sorts across the semiconductor chips and across the last 2 weeks, etc. as well. So I don't think there is anything to worry about. Fundamentally, the earnings growth trajectory still looks very, very strong. In fact, they're going still parabolic. But, it's just the sky-high valuations and the run-up that they've had. It's a momentum reset.
Now, top South Korean policymakers have apologized over the introduction of single-stock leverage exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-choi responding to a lawmaker's demand during a parliamentary session. The country's chief financial regulator also made an apology at a separate meeting. The remarks come amid criticism that single-stock leveraged ETFs have been fueling wild swings in South Korea's stock market. Retail investors have been piling into the products, mostly linked to Samsung and SK Hynix, on bets that there will be no let-up in AI-related demand. But recent media reports say many are nursing steep losses after sharp reversals in shares of the chip makers. The Financial Services Commission chief told Parliament that additional measures are being considered to further cool demand.
Sentiment in artificial intelligence sector swinging between intensifying worry and surging enthusiasm. Now, feeding the pessimism are concerns over the hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on technology. Now, Roland is going to walk us through the schizophrenia, if you'd like to say it that way. Is big tech overspending?
Well, investors accept that the AI demand is real. The question is whether that demand is actually profitable enough to pay for the rollout. I mean, the metric that investors are currently using is free cash flow. That's how much cash remains after the companies pay for the chips, for the data servers, and for the data centers as well. Reuters estimates that by 2027, the 5 major hyperscalers will be investing $1.57 for every additional dollar that they earn in terms of operating cash. So what that means is that, just because you have strong revenues doesn't mean that they are satisfied with that alone.
All right, so close the loop for us. Where does the so-called AI circular economy come in?
Yeah, the circular economy is about a small network loop of companies feeding onto themselves. This is the example. Cloud companies invest in AI developers. Now, these AI developers then use that money to buy AI chips. And sometimes they also give back some of that money to the cloud computing companies for cloud computing capacity. At the same time, AI chip makers will then sell to the data centers, who are their main customers. But because data centers, it's such a big investment, they might actually get security or borrowing from the AI chip developers because they are flush with cash. And ultimately, the data center then sells that compute and cloud capacity back to the cloud companies themselves.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, go on.
I was curious because it's not just an American story. It is here in Asia as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Asia is exposed in every single layer. We have Japan's SoftBank, who is a top AI investor. We have TSMC in Taiwan, SK Hynix, Samsung, who are the top chip makers. We also have Alibaba, Tencent, also building their own infrastructure rollouts and AI models with the likes of Huawei, as well as the Chinese chip makers that's actually rolling out the domestic supply chain. So Tencent, Alibaba may not be spending as much as like their US counterparts, but they all face the same bottleneck, which is memory. And the biggest AI chip maker right now is SK Hynix. And they are causing a bottleneck because they say that, well, we are maxing out our production, but we've already sold all the stock for 2026. So what that means is that when the likes of Meta or the likes of Amazon give their guidance in terms of demand for AI chips, that's going to feed through to Asia right away.
Yeah. So name names. Who is most exposed this earnings season?
Right. Analysts say that Microsoft will be in the spotlight because it's leaned so heavily on OpenAI as well as their own cloud computing, Azure. So investors really want to see whether all that capital spending actually will generate real revenues. The other is Amazon, because Amazon by far has the biggest investments into data center rollouts. And Meta, well, it's got it easier a little bit because Meta has managed to translate some of that targeted ad revenues into their spending. But all four basically facing the same version of that story. If CAPEX or capital expenditure outruns cash flow, well, then something's got to give. So it's going to be whether your investments are going to slow down, whether you're going to borrow more money, or whether you're not going to be buying back as much stocks.
So I go back again to the schizophrenic nature on the surface. How would you reassure investors that the spending is sustainable?
Well, it seems kind of, commonsensical. I mean, basically, AI revenue has to grow faster than the cost of building and depreciating these data centers. And secondly, the companies or the investors want to be assured that these companies can actually get revenues for the data centers just from other customers as well, not just the ones that are in that closed loop. And finally, of course, free cash flow, the metric that I was mentioning earlier, that needs to be clearer that it's actually starting to improve before investors can have confidence back in AI companies.
Well, always great to have you sitting with us here, Roland. Thank you so much for that explanation. Roland Lim speaking to us right there. Now, here's where we take a break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, a collapsed shopping mall in Japan, putting earthquake-resistant engineering under the spotlight. Why do some buildings survive powerful quakes while others fail? Plus, China reportedly taking action to secure safe passage for its tankers through the Red Sea. This is East Asia Tonight. Here are the headlines we're following. South Korea's financial leaders convene an emergency meeting to discuss market turmoil that has wiped out billions of dollars of value after a two-day tech-led plunge in the stock market. China accuses the U.S. of suppressing Chinese firms after Washington banned the import of foreign-made humanoid robots and power inverters on security grounds. The rescuers in a race against time to reach survivors a day after a powerful quake shook southern Japan, killing at least 13 people. A part of Aeon Mall in Kumamoto Prefecture collapsed under the earthquake, trapping people inside. The shopping centre had just reopened in June. It was rebuilt with upgraded seismic features after being damaged in the devastating 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes. Yet, appearances can be misleading. A building that looks this badly damaged isn't necessarily one that failed. So, what does an earthquake-resistant building actually do? Well, it's designed first and foremost to protect lives by preventing total collapse during strong shaking. And that's giving people enough time to evacuate safely. For example, during the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake, many modern office towers in Tokyo remained standing despite significant swaying, allowing people to evacuate safely. Now, a quake-resistant building also absorbs and dissipates seismic forces. Instead of snapping under pressure, its structural elements are built to flex in a controlled way, helping the building stay standing. Now, the Tokyo Skytree, one such example. Its central reinforced core, inspired by traditional Japanese pagodas, act like a spine, helping it to stabilize the tower during earthquakes. Another example, Taipei 101 in Taiwan. Now, hidden inside is a 660-ton mass damper. Now, that's a giant steel sphere that swings the opposite direction of the building's motion, and that helps counteract movement caused by earthquakes and powerful typhoons. And that's the key takeaway. An earthquake-resistant building isn't designed to look untouched after a major tremor. It's designed to reduce the risk of catastrophic collapse, giving people a better chance of getting out safely. A seismologist tells us how the damage at Aeon Mall highlights the difference between earthquake-resistant design and other hazards.
Information is not definite, but I think the mall withstood the earthquake itself reasonably well, with some damage. But then, if there was a gas leak and a gas explosion, as apparently is the case, then that was not designed for. It could not be designed for. So it goes to show you, you can reduce damage significantly by proper design and planning. But from time to time, something unexpected will always happen, unfortunately. The problem was not the overall structure of the building, but if you have restaurants with cooking facilities inside the building, that if they didn't properly secure the gas lines, then this was a design failure. And the explosion, the building was designed to withstand earthquakes, but not explosions. So it goes to show you that it's not only the safety of the structure itself, but of the furnishings and gas lines and so on inside the building that also apparently were not sufficient.
Another news, the U.S. military says it intercepted Iranian missiles targeting American forces in the Middle East, ending a brief pause in fighting. Washington called it an attempted surprise attack. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they fired several missiles in response to U.S. actions against Iranian interests. The development comes after President Donald Trump said the U.S. was engaging in good talks with Iran, but threatened to resume strikes if negotiations were unproductive. Meanwhile, Iran has reportedly ruled out Oman's Gulf-backed plan to jointly manage the Strait of Hormuz. A senior official told Reuters this arrangement will not serve Tehran's interests. He says only Iran and Oman can decide on arrangements for the Strait of Hormuz, and that Tehran rejects any role for other nations. The proposed plan reportedly allowed voluntary contributions from shipping companies while preventing Iran from exercising sole control over the waterway. So as the standoff over the Strait of Hormuz continues to disrupt global shipping, traffic through another key maritime choke point has climbed. Shipping data shows 37 commodity vessels transited the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on Tuesday. That's the highest in a week. Meanwhile, only 5 ships transited the Strait of Hormuz. The increase came as the Houthis said they fired ballistic missiles at a Saudi oil tanker in the Red Sea after earlier attacks on Saudi oil facilities. China reportedly held direct talks with the militant group seeking safe passage for its tankers through the southern Red Sea. Beijing is looking to keep Saudi crude flowing as it scrambles to replace supplies disrupted by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Singapore is giving out an additional $900 million to help local businesses and households cushion the impact of the Middle East crisis. Second Minister for Finance Jeffrey Xiao says the support comes amid expectations of higher global energy prices and continued geopolitical uncertainty in the Gulf. Now, this is the second tranche of support measures following a $1 billion assistance package announced in April.
Performance across the economy has been uneven. Businesses that are more exposed to supply disruptions and energy costs have come under greater pressure. SMEs in particular feel these cost pressures more acutely.
Among the measures is easier access to loans for local firms, with the government taking on a larger share of the lending risk. Eligible SMEs will also receive cash grants, while market and hawker centre stall holders will get rental support.
We understand that many SMEs are concerned about higher operating costs and their cash flow. We aim to help them better maintain their costs in the near term, while at the same time giving them the support they need to make business adjustment for the long run.
At the same time, Singaporean households will receive more vouchers to help with daily expenses. Eligible public households will also get more utility rebates, while lower-income Singaporeans will receive more support. Now, U.S. President Trump held face-to-face talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the first time since launching a joint war against Iran. Mr. Netanyahu said the talks were pinned on ensuring that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. The White House said the two leaders plan to discuss the framework agreement the U.S. and Israel signed with Lebanon over the Israel-Hezbollah war and the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Mr. Netanyahu joined scores of senior U.S. officials and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington, and that was for the funeral of Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, a longtime supporter of both Ukraine and Israel. Mitch McCann tells us about President Trump's high-level meetings with the Israeli and Ukrainian leaders.
Netanyahu arrived at what seemed to be, prior to the meeting, a difficult point in their relationship, and all the strains were obvious well before it started. On Fox News this morning, Donald Trump was asked about reports that Israel is concerned about an area of Iran called Pickaxe Mountain, near where one of Iran's nuclear sites is located. Now, Donald Trump was frustrated with that information being made public, saying that he doesn't need Bibi to tell me that. Bibi telling me that, he's telling me that because he wants me to stay involved. Speaking to Netanyahu, he said, why don't you just tell me? Why don't you have to announce it to the world? So obviously frustrated there. But Netanyahu said the encounter was one of the best meetings the two have had. He described it as excellent, and he said it was about full partnership, mutual support, and understanding of the shared goal to ensure that Iran will not have nuclear weapons and also other goals. So what happens next? Well, we're waiting for more information from the president to see if he's perhaps given Israel the green light to strike Iranian energy infrastructure, something that Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, reportedly has suggested that America has prevented them from doing so far. But I think what was interesting in both of the meetings that Donald Trump had today is that they were closed meetings from the press. Now, often these meetings appear on the White House schedule as being closed, and then Donald Trump decides to invite the press in. but that didn't happen in either of the meetings that he had today. The first meeting of the day was with Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky said of this meeting that the president and I discussed licenses for Patriot interceptor production, there's the Patriot missile system, and several other ideas that could help. He said we also spoke about diplomacy. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu were in town for the funeral of the late Senator Lindsey Graham, who had actually just returned from Ukraine in the hours before he died. So really, the last act of his political career was seeking peace for Ukraine. So today we saw on one hand strained relations perhaps with Benjamin Netanyahu, if that Fox News interview is anything to go by, but on the other hand perhaps a much warmer reception for Volodymyr Zelensky, who was close with an ally of Donald Trump and Senator Graham, and also after that strike on the Iranian ship in recent days.
So much more still to come on East Asia tonight. The implications for China's biotech sector after a 6-year-old child reportedly died following an experimental gene editing treatment. And how a rural basic income plan is changing one of South Korea's most restricted border counties. Well, everyone, we're going to China. Its biotech sector in the spotlight after the reported death of a 6-year-old girl in March last year from an experimental gene editing treatment at a hospital in Shanghai. A joint investigation by U.S. journal Science and U.S.-based publication Retraction Watch has raised questions about the lead-up to her treatment and what was disclosed after she died. CNA's senior correspondent Tan Yuguan joins us from Shanghai with some of those details. Yuguan, give us the details that have had so many people up in arms about this case.
Well, it all started when teachers found that the girl was falling behind her peers at kindergarten. She was speaking in simple sentences and needing training chopsticks to eat. It turns out she had a rare genetic disorder affecting her development, speech and movement. With no established cure, the parents were eventually introduced to a team led by neuroscientist Qiu Zilong. He offered a highly experimental, customized therapy that involved injecting 2 modified viruses carrying gene editing machinery to correct a faulty letter in the girl's DNA. But the girl died of complications after the treatment.
You talked about it a little, but was her condition, her original condition, life-threatening to begin with? And were the parents aware or informed of the risks?
Well, no, her condition was not life-threatening. So why did they even proceed? Well, according to Science, the consent form warned of a serious blood vessel complication, but did not explicitly state that could be fatal. The parents also told the publication that the possibility of death was not discussed. Even the hospital ethics committee didn't have the full picture. You see, there was a final safety study conducted, and in it, all 4 monkeys developed moderate to severe liver damage. One animal given a high dose also suffered kidney damage. The report says the hospital ethics committee, who approved the treatment without even getting to review that final report. Subsequently, when the girl was given the treatment, she did indeed suffer kidney injury and a blood vessel complication. She died 7 days later. The hospital ethics panel later concluded that the treatment was definitely related to her death. Aside from the issues of disclosure, experts who reviewed the Science report also point out other shortcomings in approval process. Here's Professor Julian Savulescu, who heads the Center for Biomedical Ethics at NUS Medicine in Singapore. Here's what he has to say.
There needs to be good evidence that there's going to be a significant benefit. And secondly, that the risks are minimised and smaller than the expected benefits. And those risks have to be accurately communicated both to the parents in the case of a child and the ethics committee. And there needs to be independent expert evaluation that the expected benefits are greater than the expected harms.
And Yuguan, sadly, the irregularities didn't stop there, did they? They continued after her death.
So what happened was, a year after the girl's death, researchers linked to the treatment published a preclinical animal study in Nature. It presented the technology as promising and discussed its potential for clinical use. The paper did not mention the girl's death or the liver and kidney injuries in the final monkey safety study. And that's what prompted the girl's parents to bring their story to Science, because they saw other parents were circulating the paper on a WeChat group and voicing optimism about the treatment. They feared other children might be harmed.
You know, investigations generally follow the money. So who has funded the treatment?
Well, according to Science, the consent form signed by the parents stated that a company founded by lead scientist Qiu Zilong would bear all the costs. But the family still ended up paying around $860,000 through foundations, companies, and direct transfers. Now, that included $130,000 transferred directly to the personal bank account of a researcher overseeing the lab work. He later returned the money after the child died. The Science report says that Cho himself did not directly ask the family for money, but it says that the father paid for meals, gave him gifts, including electronic devices, and a case on Mao Tai.
And when you're looking at reactions that are coming out from this case, what have they been online and otherwise? And what could possibly be the impact on gene editing research going forward?
Well, there's been a lot of outrage expressed, many questioning how the team could have gone through with the treatment after the primate findings were so troubling. However, despite this failure, Professor Savulescu from NUS points out that the gene editing technology known as base editing remains genuinely promising.
This experiment was a disaster. The risks were unreasonable. It should never have been approved. However, it's important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. A month before this experiment, a baby in Philadelphia's life was saved using exactly the same technology, but conducted ethically in a major hospital with proper ethical scrutiny and review.
So the broader challenge now is to establish accountability without allowing this one tragedy to discredit a potentially transformative area of medicine. Jill?
Yu Guan, thank you so much for that report from Shanghai. Our senior correspondent, Tan Yu Guan there. Well, in South Korea next, a pilot scheme that pays people to stay in rural regions, helping breathe life into local economies. But for one county bordering North Korea, tight military controls may hold back long-term development. CNA senior correspondent Im Young-suk reports from Yeoncheon.
This is Yeoncheon, the northernmost county in Gyeonggi province, sitting right on the border with North Korea. It's one of the most heavily restricted places in the country, with much of its land under military control. Now it has become a testing ground for a pilot program that gives every resident a so-called rural monthly basic income of 150,000 won or $100. The program now covers about 10 counties across South Korea. But it was first trialed in Cheongsan village in Yeoncheon 4 years ago. Fewer than 4,000 people live here, and more than half are above the age of 60. For restaurant owner An Se-il, promises of a basic income led him to return to his hometown after nearly 50 years away.
이제 고향을 찾아온 거죠. 그래서 여기다 집을 하나 줬어요. 이제 여기가 살겠다고 장사할 생각은 안 했는데 기본소득을 준다고 얘기를 그래서 시작을 한 거예요. 특히 그 기본소득 때문에 사실은 하기 시작한 거예요. 덕을 많이 봤죠.
The basic income has to be spent within the county, and normally within your own town. But those living in bigger towns are also allowed to spend it in smaller villages. So customers from bigger towns nearby have been coming here since the program expanded county-wide. Shin Young-sun first came to Yeoncheon as the wife of a soldier. 4 decades later, she still calls it home. For her, too, the basic income has significantly boosted business.
프로테이지로 따지면은 한 50%는 영향이 있죠. 30-40%지만은 그래도 정말로 진짜 영향 많아요. 다 아쉽죠. 이제 사람들이 이제 멘붕이 올까 봐 좀 이제 걱정되죠.
She says there are misperceptions about life in this border county.
서울에서 가깝잖아요. 근교잖아요. 서울 사람들 보기에는 여기가 전방이라 굉장히 여기가 그냥 오진지 알아요. 근데 이제 막상 오다 보면 너무 좋다 그래요. 여기가. 근데 여기 굉장히 좋아요. 저도 이제 오래 살았지만은 너무 좋아요. 여기.
But attracting jobs and investment remains a challenge. Just outside town, an industrial park stands largely empty. 3 years after completion, its occupancy rate hovers at 29%. Yeoncheon's Mayor Kim Dok-hyun says basic income alone cannot reverse decades of decline.
이 기본소득 가지고 이것 때문에 인구가 나가고 들어오는 게 뭐 다소의 영향은 있지만 근본적인 그게 결정적으로 없다는 것이죠. 그러려면 주민이 외부에서 연천에 와서 난 살아야 되겠다는 생활 환경을 잘 만들어야 되는데요. 특히 또 젊은이들이 들어오게 하려면 일자리가 필요한 것이고 그러다 보니까 지역에 기업을 유치하고
He says existing military restrictions have made that task even harder.
연천군 전 지역이 서울시보다 더 넓은 면적을 갖고 있는데 이 면적의 94% 정도가 군사시설 보호구역으로 규제를 받고 있어요. 여러 가지 건축, 고도, 행위자를 받는단 말입니다. 그래서 인구가 한때는 7만이었다가 지금 4만 이제 3천으로 이제 회복돼 가는데.
Still, that's up from about 42,000 before the first test run in 2022. With the expansion, the government has put in place safeguards to prevent potential issues such as fraud. In Cheongsan, many residents say the program has transformed everyday life.
노인분들이 그냥 자식들이 주는 용돈 이런 거 갖고 그냥 아껴가지고 뭐 이렇게 제대로 드시지도 못했는데 현재 이거 되고 나서는 자식들이 손주들이 오면은 식당 가서 우리 노인분들이 대접하는 그런 결과가 됐어요.
4 years after launching South Korea's first rural basic income pilot, Cheongsan has shown what a little extra income can do for a community. But in a county where military restrictions limit development, residents here say reversing decades of population decline will take much more. Im Yeon-suk, CNA, Yeoncheon County, South Korea.
Yeon-suk takes us to the end of Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget, though, your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Also check us out on Facebook and YouTube. Bye-bye.